Want to start production without the letter of credit? Posted by Flatten Inner Tube. This story goes back to the mid-1990s when I was working for a company that made small metering pumps used in the manufacture of many products. The biggest market was in the spinning of synthetic fiber, an industry that literally touches all of us, except nudist and cotton-only folks, every day. In broad terms, the fiber material starts out as a liquid solution, rayon, viscose fiber, acrylics, or a molten polymer, polyester, nylon, polypropylene, etc. The pumps push the fluid through a spinneret at a very precise flow rate, creating the filament that's made into the fiber. At that time, an average plant would have 75 of the pumps in service. A really big plant would have as many as 1,100. One plant that made the cigarette filter material had a couple of thousand running at any given time. I was working in the international group when I got a fax, mid-90s, remember, from our commissioned agent Joseph in India. He wanted me to call him at home to discuss something. He had a customer that was willing to buy 340 pumps for a fiber plant. Joe asked if we could increase his commission from 10% to 15%. It seemed that the end user's purchasing guy wanted to, set up his retirement fund. Corporate policy permitted such things if it was local custom and if it was signed off by the GM. It was customary and it was approved. In short order, a $640,000 order rolled in. I'm a hero as it's the biggest order of the year. But the order has the caveat from Joe to not start production until the letter of credit was in hand. This was about 30 weeks before the end of the fiscal year. The pumps had a lead time of 16 weeks, so 14 weeks to get the letter of credit. Piece of cake. Manufacturing and the GM were, of course, eager to get things going. Shipping the pumps in the current fiscal year would make a pretty good impact on the shipping dollars and would probably be enough to get the GM into bonus territory. So, predictably, the GM is pushing the manufacturing folks to get started. The manufacturing folks were honest, like hobos on ham sandwiches, looking for permission to start manufacturing. First, it was weekly, then about 10 weeks out from the drop-dead start date, it went to twice a week and then to daily. We refused to release the order because no letter of credit was in hand. I was chasing Joe a couple of times a week for the letter of credit. He kept getting reassurances that it was coming. On a trip to India, I went with Joe to the customer to see when we could expect the letter of credit. It is coming. Well, okay. So a week before the drop-dead date, no letter of credit. I was in my sales manager Tim's office when the head of manufacturing comes waltzing in looking for the release. Tim looked at him and said, "Our agent says don't start without a letter of credit. We want to trust them, but make them if you want." Production started the next day. These pumps were mostly standard. Mostly. You see, the pumping bits were mounted on a casting that extended down to a foot that fit between two trunnions. The assembly would be pinched between the trunnions and pivoted over onto a gear onto a line shaft. The pump had a gear on its drive shaft, and it meshed with the line shaft gear, and the pump turned. If this seems weird, it is the finest 1928 technology that allows a failed pump to be isolated and hot swapped. See this picture for some clarity on the weirdness. The standard angle on that trunnion was 90 degrees, but not these pumps. These were 105 degrees for some reason. So, 340 pumps were made with non-standard ports, and if the letter of credit never came, manufacturing is stuck with 340 oddball pumps. And the letter of credit never came. Year-end hits and the pumps are finished, goods in inventory at $640,000. The real problems start when the GM ends up catching heck from the corporate offices in Illinois about the excessive inventory. Crap slides downhill, so sales and marketing catches heck too. Joe found out later that the purchasing guy didn't have the authority to buy $500,000 in pumps. He was just trying to line his pockets. Shocking, right? Where's the malicious compliance? You want us to release the order? We'll release the order. Don't blame us if it goes sideways. Update. 4 months later, I managed to find another company in another country to buy the pumps, complete with the weird 105-degree trunnion mount. Did I get any credit for that? Of course not. I left the company shortly thereafter, being on the outs with my boss for other reasons and on the outs with manufacturing for letting them make those dang pumps. sticking to the rules. You make them and you're like, hey, OP, you're like, hey, I don't think you should do that. We've not got the letter in yet, but if you really want to, that's up to you. And then going out, finding a whole new buyer for them and not getting credit. Daggone, that is some malicious compliance with a bit of a bummer thrown in there for OP. Way to go anyway, man. Your trash cans may only be out at specific times, posted by Chia Seed Mess. We live in an HOA, and if you don't, lucky you. We have never had any real problems, and they don't do much other than make sure the park and the gardens look good. Anyhow, for whatever reason, they decided to add a new rule. It wasn't needed, but I guess they got bored and wanted something to do. Maybe someone kept leaving their trash cans out all week. Fine, just ask them not to. It's not that hard. The new rule states that when trash cans can be put out, they can't be put out before 6 a.m. on Wednesdays and must be put back before 6 p.m. the same day. This is obviously stupid and has a few problems. First of all, some people use a different company. The HOA provided one goes on Wednesday and it's cheap, so most people use it, but you don't have to. Some people have theirs go Monday or Tuesday. Also, a lot of people here work in the medical field and just aren't home during those times, so no one is there to put out or bring in cans. So a few of us got together on how to comply, but be annoying about it. We decided to comply with their set times as best we can. Take it out at 6 when a lot of us go to work or go for a morning walk, and take it back in at 6 since most of us are home. Some of us help by taking others' bins to the street if they're at work. But when it is time to take out the trash, do it as loud as freaking possible. Bin has wheels, drag it. Got it to the street, make sure it's firmly placed on the street. Need to take out the other bag? Slap it in there and let the lid slam shut. For those who have trash go out on other days, comply with the times, but do it on your trash day. Then also put them out on Wednesday as required. If you can, leave trash in them and leave the lid open so it would bake in the sun all day. Yes, it did smell like hot trash. That's the point. After 3 weeks of this, an email was sent out. The rule was thrown out and we were all simply asked to put out and take in our cans within a reasonable amount of time, preferably on trash day. Was it really that freaking hard to ask nicely? Why not just address whoever was the problem? Know that, because an HOA rule was changed, a lawyer was paid to look over it before the CC&R could be updated. That means this stupid rule cost every resident money. Anyhow, we are already planning on voting out one member of the board who we know is the problem come the summer election. That rule was trash, man, and just for everybody to come together, maliciously comply, taking it out, leaving the trash in there, do what they say, but do it in a tricky way, and whatever they don't say, twist it around as well. Way to go, OP. Don't bother you at all tonight? Alright, posted by Mr. Gaff. So this is a fun little story from my last job working in a vegetarian and vegan food factory. It was the worst job you can imagine. The place smelled like rotting food at all times. The employees rarely ever do anything to prevent spreading illnesses. They would regularly show up sick even during the pandemic, and management was just the worst. I quickly adopted the policy of doing the least irritating job that I could find and trying to avoid listening to my shift lead since he was a jerk. For the sake of the story, let's call the shift lead Jim. Jim was a by-the-numbers guy, to the point that if you argued with him using logic, he would instead tell you that you're wrong, and his math, yes, he would point out that phrasing very deliberately, was what they were going to use, and to not think above your pay rate. So on this particular night, I worked from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., Jim decided he wanted to be really lazy since the building owner was going to be gone for the week and he wouldn't have to report anything to him for days. He spent his whole night just sitting in the office playing games on his phone, ignoring our calls because we needed assistance. After about 8 or 9 p.m. rolled around and me finally getting ticked off enough to care, I asked my department manager if he could cover for me for just a couple minutes to get Jim in there to help. We needed him to go get maintenance because the machine sealing a product called Tempeh was barely sealing any at all, and we were throwing away about 70-80% of all packages. I get into his office, and before I can say a single word, Jim says very loudly, "Whatever it is, I don't care. Just leave me alone tonight." I tried to get in a word, but he just glared at me and said, "Just get the heck out and don't bother me again." Then an evil thought crossed my mind. Cue the malicious compliance. You just want me to not bother you, Jim? Or does that mean everyone? I asked, and he says the words that screwed him over. As long as I'm not bothered, I don't care. All right, I say, and I leave with the grin that most anime villains dream of doing. I get to my department manager and I tell him that Jim doesn't want to be bothered at all tonight. My manager looks at me kinda confused at first and asks what the heck does that mean, to which I just told him Jim doesn't care what happens as long as no one bothers him. Me putting a big emphasis on the last part. Now, my department manager was the guy you go to for getting information around the build fast. He's a fast talker and quick on his feet. He lets me get back into my spot and very quickly starts darting around to each department to inform them of what transpired. Needless to say, Jim wasn't bothered at all the entire night. He even had to be waking up at 3 a.m. to do his nightly paperwork because he fell asleep. During the night, the machines packaging the soy hot dogs also started sealing poorly, but we couldn't get any maintenance out until it's been approved by Jim, so we just ran it all night. By the end of the night, my line, I worked in the boxing department boxing up the tempeh, had thrown away roughly 4 tons of tempeh. We used large red buggies that would hold at least 500 pounds, and we chucked 17 of those suckers. I won't even try to count up the dogs that were thrown out too. Needless to say, this was going to hit the company hard. The fallout. Next day, my shift comes in, and to no one's surprise, Jim is on my butt right away. Why didn't you inform me that we were losing so much product? He starts screaming into my face. The owner looked at his email and saw that we lost nearly $15,000 in product alone last night. I simply smiled at Jim, and I said to him, well, I would have said something, but you told me not to bother you all night. Jim, realizing he could be in trouble for this, doubles down on trying to blame me. You had a duty to tell me even if it's against my orders, he shouts. I calmly put my helmet on and collared coat, smile, and say, sorry, I didn't think because it was above my pay grade. And then I went out onto the floor quite happy that I knew he was either going to be in a crap ton of trouble or fired. Sadly, he wasn't fired, only in trouble. His position was nearly up for grabs, and he had to work every day for 6 months after that, with only Sundays off, before they eased up on him. Did he learn from this? No, he was still a total jerk that the whole staff generally acted nice to, but hated with a passion. You gotta love it here. I mean, manager Jim said, hey, don't talk to me all night, no matter what it is. I don't even care if this whole place is blowing up on fire, whatever. Don't talk to me. And hey, they tossed out the product. It sucks that they lost the product, but this showed and sent a fiery message to Jim to say, hey, you're not going to be talked to, then this is going to happen when you shirk your job responsibilities, fall asleep at 3 a.m., and then screw us all over. Hot dog, as they say. Way to go, OP. Of course, a little pun fun for the story. I destroyed Karen in the HOA. Click here so you don't miss this awesome story and see how OP did it. I'll see you there.